welcome everyone. My name is Patrick Paul Walsh. I'm with the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDSN, Vice President of Education, and I'm Director of the SDG Academy. And you will see that SDSN and the SDG Academy is just one of the many partners on this event. So this is part of EU Green Week. It's a partner event. And we're going to talk about a very important topic, hopefully, pathways to a circular economy, adapting vet training to market needs. Okay, so everyone is very welcome. I'm just going to do some introductory remarks, hopefully set the scene, and you're going to get a lot more detail, I think, from each and every one of the actual speakers, which will be chaired by Professor Enda Murphy from University College Dublin, and he'll introduce the other speakers. Just briefly about the SDG Academy. We're 10 years old, and we have been producing what we call MOOCs, or massive online courses. Our main platform is edX, and there's well over 55 courses there, which you can have a look at, mainly on the Sustainable Development Goals, public policy, nature, and social issues, and governance issues. But they're free and they're there. And also, we have 2 million minutes of videos in our library. So if you don't want to do the courses and you just want the individual MP4s, you can actually go into the library, and that's very handy if you want to integrate them into your teaching and courses. And they're free to do that. They're Creative Commons licenses. Today, the objectives of this workshop or webinar, firstly, we're going to discuss the importance of vocational education programs and certifications, staying relevant to the evolving labour market needs for green and digital transformation. Okay, so this is one of the key things, is that many of us whether in universities or vocational colleges are under pressure a bit to upgrade our courses and to integrate the needs of the labour market, particularly green and digital skills. And these are not just current needs, like they're future skills and future needs, but they are vitally important. And you'll see that the simple objective of transforming education or transforming training or courses and even certification that embody digital and green skills is actually not as straightforward as you might believe to start off with. Well, we're going to help Pat solutions to all of this in this webinar. We certainly, one of the things that you'll notice about the EU is that the EU is quite decentralized. There's a lot of sovereignty, if you like, over education at the member level. But it is important that when we actually go on a path, whether it's professional authorities or universities or vet colleges, and we actually integrate into our curriculums and into our training and certification, these green and digital skills, it's important there's EU-wide certification and recognition. And more importantly, that this recognition can be used by people when we look at global supply chains who actually interact with the EU. We are going to focus on a particular industry, and most of us will be just talking about the built environment, and explain why in the end. Because it's when we look at pathways to net zero, or the sectors that the EU Green Deal is looking at, and the thresholds that have been set for net zero pathways for the built environment, this is probably the most challenging sector to actually implement the Green New Deal. And for that reason, it's kind of an exciting sector to look at when we think of how you manage circular economies and global supply chains, and how exactly we can coordinate the upskilling and reskilling of education and vocational training and the workers themselves, and so on. So that's a very broad sweep, but all speakers will be in some ways related to those key objectives of the webinar. Just to also say that there's an EU project run by called BuildSkills Academy, and that will be a bit of a backdrop to 2 or 3 of the presentations, where the ambition of this was really to show how you would potentially, number one, define what green and digital skills are actually appropriate for the construction sector. So that's not as easy as you think. How you'd actually go about transforming curriculums, how then you get them recognized by professional authorities, how you'd actually get it recognized in the EU market itself and beyond. And that's the nature of the BuildSkills, and obviously it's focused on the built environment. So good few of the speakers, and Cleantech, Maria here is the leader on this project. This is going very well, but it is the backdrop to this conversation here. In my little introduction, I just want to show, how, people would, I think when they think of the SDGs, might think of SDG 4, and they might think of education as something that's kind of K-12 or even preschool or secondary level or even university level. But I just want to make the case that actually just to show you where I think there's a huge backdrop, which is about professional training and curriculum. It's not just about, what we call elementary years or K-12 years or secondary or university training. In fact, I'm going to show you where in the documents we talk about professional training and the SDGs and where green and digital skills fit in. I'll also point out the complexities of the built environment when we think of the circular economy kind of framework and how potentially challenging this is for curriculum development and deployment actually into the industry for transformational change. And then I'll just briefly talk, because the other speakers will get to it, about the absolute need for EU certification. And it's not just, maybe, you can have your national frameworks and your national accreditation frameworks, which is fine, but surely there's an addendum or a kind of an additional cert that would be recognized across the industry for transformational skills like digital and green skills that everyone would actually accredit. And I know there's already been talk about the EU university degree concept, but this could be very much followed with the micro-credentials and certification that you could do for vet colleges. And of course, the big thing, and we'll have this in capabilities for the future presentation by Elena from UNITAR, is that, particularly every sector actually, but particularly the built environment, this is about importing, exporting. This cannot be done in isolation in Europe alone. So any of the sort of transformations and accreditations that take place have to be recognizable and have to be done in partnership with more global partners, right? So we shouldn't be just thinking from national to EU level, but also more global, that if people make the effort to embed future skills into their curriculum and they want to accredit them, that should be recognized not just in that nation state and member states, but also EU and beyond. So starting, I'm going to assume, big assumption, of course, that you have some idea about the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and the biodiversity frameworks. And, these frameworks, I know they're global, and you might say, what's this got to do with the EU? But if you actually look at the Green New Deal and you look at the new directives on biodiversity and ESG compliance and these things, there is no doubt that these global agreements are the backdrop to those legal frameworks. And they are imposing themselves now on the nation states or the members as well. But I just want to focus in on, and this is a partnership that the SDG Academy runs called Mission 4.7. So this is Sustainable Development Goal 4. Target 7, and you see it there. By 2030, just want to reduce the things in my. By 2030, ensure all learners acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among other things, education for sustainable development, sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. Right. So. This is let's say, a community of practice that includes the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens, UNESCO, and the Center for Sustainable Development, Columbia University, amongst others. But what I like about Mission 4.7, it talks about a continuum of education. So it's preschool, K-12, high school, onto university, but then onto the labor force. Because if you really think about it, right, a lot of people, whether they're the CEOs, or whether they're the, C-suites or senior people in corporates, in governments, and in civil society. Like, we might have 4 degrees, but very little of our education actually showed us how to care for people and care for planet. And in some ways, you know, we're in a climate emergency. We have to implement these policies. We can't be waiting for kids coming up through school and secondary school and university to be the leaders, to do the implementation process. We all have to go back to school, basically, every single one of us. And particularly in a project like BuildSkills, when you're trying to look at curriculum you know so well, and accreditation process that you know so well, incorporating these new future skills on how to care for people and nature are not that easy. And also thinking about the potential of AI and the digital transformation. This is not so easy to embed this into the new curriculum and get it accepted by governments and corporates and civil society, and also to have it appropriately accredited. But Mission 4.7 is a good guide. It's a good North Star for this way of thinking. And the other thing, in 2023, we had the midpoint review of the SDGs in the UN. Both Ireland, again, co-facilitated with Qatar, a thing called a political declaration, which was adopted at the General Assembly when the HLPF was under the General Assembly every 4 years. The next one will be 2027, where actually we'll start thinking about the post-2030 agenda, which we hope will be a more continuum of what we were doing on the SDGs, which will go up to hopefully 2050 or 2045. But this is the statement that's made about education and professional training, and I think it's important, right? And just to say, even though lack of consensus is happening in the Security Council and the General Assembly and lots of security geopolitical issues, all member states signed up to this in 2023. Because my basic belief is that most people in society, most people in government, the ambassadors, academia, want a world of peace and sustainable development, and they made sure that this political declaration was unanimous or accepted by each of the 193 countries during the General Assembly meeting 2023. But just this paragraph, I think, summarized very nicely the belief about what needs to happen in SDG 4 for the SDG transformations to have. So, for example, it talks about investment into inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for all, which, again, I believe everyone should be going back to vet and universities doing micro-credentials to upskill themselves and care for people in nature. And of course, it includes early childhood and youth and adult literacy programs, cultural education for sustainable development, digital technologies for education, skills enhancements, affordable higher education and vocational training, education in emergencies, and teachers' continual professional development, and so on. So that quote there, again, to me, it emphasizes Mission 4.7, this continuum of learning, and that everyone, whether they're in school, in education, or in the workforce, has to take on board the digital and green skills transformation, and they have to go back to school and learn this and learn to implement it. The built environment, in just thinking, I'm not an expert in the built environment, but I'm an economist and I like the circular economy literature. I'm well aware of it. But when you're actually thinking of where you extract the minerals for building and construction and housing and all this, and where they come from, and then how these products are made and how it goes into building construction and use and deconstruction, and where are the opportunities to minimize the damage on Mother Earth, where are the opportunities to keep recycling, repairing, reusing, recycle minerals, change the nature of materials, etc., how to maybe efficient in energy use, how to not be actually using nature as a sink in terms of transportation, the ocean, in terms of the landfills and so on. It is quite a complex industry, and it's even more complex with the fact that when you look at imports and exports, you realize that this is a global footprint. This is not just a footprint within a nation state or in the EU, that you have to really start thinking about if you're embodying professional training on how to care for people in nature when you're involved in any way with the built environment, you see it's actually very complex. And complexity, even just the physical movements of things and buying of things, when you actually then put in standards and legal requirements and architects and business models and insurance and all of these other things, you'll see how complex the whole this idea of transforming the built environment to achieve net zero in the SDGs actually becomes. Finally, we're going to get ended is in the chair. I don't know, you might talk about this, but there was in the Summit of the Future in 2024, in the Action Days, we did a side event. And again, we were emphasizing the Isabella there was talking about the BuildSkills Academy. Enda was talking about the micro-credentials. This is the intersection potentially of universities with vet colleges and government programs and corporate programs to train people up. Elena is going to talk again about the supply chains and the importance of transforming those supply chains to incorporate future skills to achieve sustainable development. That's it. So you might want to go back on that webinar if you're kind of interested in those projects, but I think today is going to be more up to date and complete. So with that, there's our handles. Sign up to our newsletter for any of our new courses and information. And without further ado, then I'm going to hand the chair over to Enda Murphy of University College Dublin, who will chair the panel, and I very much look forward to all the contributions and the Q&A at the end.
Thanks very much, Paul, and thank you everyone for coming along. I'm going to be relatively brief because I want to make sure that we keep on time and you get to hear all of our speakers. But just by way of introduction, really, I suppose, to this particular panel discussion, which is going to focus on keeping vocational educational training and certifications relevant in the circular economy. I'm not going to repeat what Paul has said, but I suppose to re-emphasize the fact that I think that there is a growing recognition globally that people will need to update and improve their existing knowledge, their skills base, their competencies to fill gaps that they have between when they achieve their formal education and training and the changing needs of society and the labour market. That's particularly the case as we move towards sustainability transitions and transformations in the economy and in the built environment. Some of the key statistics sometimes I like to point out is that according to the OECD Skills for Jobs database, about 80 million workers in Europe have skills that are mismatched with their jobs. On the other hand, about 40% of employers have difficulties filling positions due to a lack of required skills. So there's a clear gap, and I think a need there to upskill and to have constant and ongoing lifelong learning available for the workforce to provide us with the skills that we need to run the economy and to transition to a more sustainable economic setup in the future. With that in mind, I think we have 4 wonderful, very esteemed speakers here today. I'll introduce them in turn and I'll introduce them as we go along. But in the interest of time, I'm going to push along and give them their particular slots. So the first speaker that I would like to welcome is Elena Proden from UNITAR. Elena is a development economist with more than 15 years experience working for the UN at country, global and regional levels on capacity building and applied research, mostly focusing on sustainability. She currently works as a senior specialist and team leader of the strategic implementation of the Agenda 2030 unit at UNITAR, supporting higher education and academic engagement initiatives. So I'm going to hand over the floor to Elena for 10 minutes to give a brief presentation.
Thank you very much, Enda. It is my pleasure to be joining today this side event also to talk about an initiative that we've developed together with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, but also another sister agency, UNIDO, within the UN family. I am myself from the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. So this initiative was presented last year at the 2nd Multilateral Industrial Policy Forum, and I'll come back to why it's important. But it was born earlier out of a partnership, which is called UN SDG Partnership, that provides a gateway to learning materials from different sustainable development training providers from across the United Nations system, but also academia and other providers, for example, Sustainable Development Solutions Network as well. So we provide a gateway to link and enable learners to find relevant materials in an easy and effective manner. But it's more than that. It's a space for partnerships and collaborations. And so within this partnership, we established a couple of years ago what we call SDG for Business Task Force, where different interested agencies from World Economic Forum to Global Compact, International Organization for Employers, Global Reporting Initiative, Green Growth Knowledge Network, etc., but also, of course, SDSN, UNIDO, and UNITAR have come together to discuss how to best address the needs of small and medium-sized enterprises around the world to support sustainability transitions. And what we thought that it would be really nice if we could offer multiple learning opportunities that could be tailored to sector needs in a way that the learners could really relate to sustainable development concepts and implications in their context-relevant manner. And then we've been thinking about who are the key partners in this endeavor. And we thought, of course, there are policymakers, businesses, but there are also academia and vocational education institutions. And this concept has grown from this start to the idea of actually addressing and promoting more inclusive and greener global value chains, because this is a global approach. So capabilities for the future hub, it's really an idea of developing a blueprint for how to facilitate public to private partnerships, multi-stakeholder partnerships that could provide better access to better learning opportunities, both in terms of quality, but also accessibility to learning content that is really relevant to different sectors and stakeholders. And as we were thinking through the concept at UNITAR, we had an opportunity also to work on built environment last year, together with the Saudi Green Building Forum. And that was an interesting experience because we also linked up with University College Dublin, UNIDO colleagues. And we saw that, of course, there are many similarities with the European region, but there is also geographic context, and there may be some differences. There is a willingness. So while there was no official ESG regulations coming into force, there was real interest in the region to really start moving in this direction. And a lot of companies in the development and construction sector have been looking at certification schemes. However, these certification schemes are quite limited. Then there are not yet global sector standards to facilitate the application of ESG requirements. And then also there were some other aspects that we could see. Sometimes you could actually see that there are some trade-offs in sustainability gains, and certain objectives are prioritized, for example, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, whereas maybe others are still in shadow, like the ones related to chemical waste management. But I think one thing that came out clearly, first, it's the importance of stakeholder engagement for the private sector as they engage. And the other one is the issue of very practically data availability across the value chains. But of course, it also has the implementations in terms of how do you understand what is your impact globally, essentially, the impact of your business, and how do you transform your business so that you reduce negative impacts and you increase positive ones. And so out of these, that was just one example, but the idea was to try to really develop learning opportunities or pathways that could be relevant to different sectors by really steering collaborations between industrial policy, industrial authorities, businesses, large companies, also some with the expertise and know-how, but also SMEs, and then also academic and vocational education institutions. And what we came up with this concept of co-creation, where you actually bring together in multi-stakeholder dialogues, public and private sectors and education, to discuss firstly how to support the development of more coherent national industrial policies, but how to also strengthen multilateral industrial coordination. And Paul has referred to that if you are doing it on your own, you may not be realizing, for example, maybe you are promoting greener global value chains, but they are not as inclusive. If there are no capacity building opportunities in lower income countries, for example, where SMEs simply don't have these learning opportunities and they will be excluded from the global value chains. So that was a little bit the idea. How do you strengthen collaborations within the country, but also across? How do you use this then to develop learning strategies? And then how do you leverage these partnerships to also develop learning content and provide flexible learning opportunities, including by using micro-credentials, for example? And so here it's just my final slide. You can see this is a little bit the idea of how you really strengthen these partnerships and collaborations to provide better access to learning and training for SMEs, also to enable vocational education and training institutions from different countries to benefit from these global public goods, essentially the knowledge that is being created, and then enable them to tap into what exists and then adapt and customize it to the national and sector needs. So we are working on this concept. We presented it at the Multilateral Industrial Policy Forum, and we hope to be able to operationalize it very soon. And we are looking forward to engaging with various partners who may have relevant learning available that could benefit this initiative.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Elena. That was really insightful. And we will move quickly on to maintain time to the next speaker today. And the next speaker for us is Maria Nakova from CTPG and BSA. Just to give you a brief introduction to Maria, she's over 20 years of experience of leadership at the grassroots of innovation, sustainability and skills development, and has dedicated her career of project management to empower professionals and businesses to adapt to the evolving demands of green and digital economy. She's the project leader of the BuildSkills Academy, an influential organisation, and head of the European Digital Innovation Hub in the Construction Centre. Maria, I'll give you the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Anda, very much. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be part of this wonderful event and to briefly share some insight on first our great and very well-known BuildSkills Academy project, but also some cross-cutting topics regarding the network of the European Digital Innovation Hubs. I will step on the words of Elena, sharing that we need as a society to boost the public-private partnerships. And I believe that both initiatives gives this. We are using the construction sector as a test bed for this, and it is more than clear why do we do it. It is the most impactful and important sector in the European economy, generating approximately 10% of the total GDP, and also provide more than 15 million direct jobs. And of course, it is extremely important to ensure the green and digital transition of this sector, as it generates around 40% of the waste, but also consumes 1/3 of the EU materials, of the energy, and generates 35% of green gas emissions. So in this is a sector that definitely needs to have digitalization and circularity, and then transformation is a key importance for the European economy. So there are two very influential networks that we have the chance to be part of, that are uniting the different sides of one and the same coin. All the important partners, the knowledge triangle, but also the quadruple helix, including the governments. So the network of the Central Vocational Excellence and the EDIH, both aiming at mobilizing and achieving joint efforts across stakeholders in the EU, shared vision and efforts, how to digitalize and how to ensure the ambitious priorities set by the European Commission. I believe that you all heard about the new AI continent and the great ambitions of the European Commission to become one of the most influential continents and including the AI in each and every step of our work. Again, the traditional and very important construction sector should be the first test bed to check the availability. So this is the greatest part, that through the partnership we managed to achieve synergetic approach to network the networks, to support the right partners, and to really find the solution of the current needs. So the network of the Centers of Vocational Excellence, which are uniting different industrial players, but also educational and vet institutions, reshaping the future of the skills. Paul, in his first words, mentioned the keyword micro-credentials, which is the general aim of the entire network of Centers of Vocational Excellence, because we need to change the educational systems, not only in one and another country, but throughout Europe and beyond. Because with the deployment of new technologies, the traditional educational path is facing significant problems. Nobody has 4 to 5 years for dedication to a specialty, because with artificial intelligence, the things that you've learned in your first year are outdated once you're graduated. So the European Commission aiming to support this by creating knowledge hub with 3 tools: matchmaking, map, and access to exchange, which is the network of the Centers of Vocational Excellence. And I'm proud to be the project leader of one of these networks, the BuildSkills Academy, where we integrated a real ecosystem approach to support transitional skills in construction. We have 17 partners from 10 countries, including 6 core ecosystems, both having an industrial partner and an educational one in Bulgaria, Greece, Italy, Lithuania, Cyprus, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. You can see here in the triangle all the core partners, and outside are the supporting organizations, because we gather influential industry representatives, FIEC, as a general European organization responsible for construction, and also much, much more. So we have also 3 following ecosystems supporting the deployment of what we have done. The first one is Norway, then we have Serbia, and we have Germany, where our colleagues later today will share, my colleague and of course friend Dina will share some insight on the achievements that our German partner has contributed to BuildSkills. So, indeed, BuildSkills aim at adapting and updating the vet services offered to the emerging skills needs in field of green and digital. Here in the QR code, you can check different and very, very important tools, our Build and Rich Skills methodology. This is a methodology that could be used by vet centers throughout Europe to enrich their own courses with green and digital content. So this methodology is supported by this digital platform. Thus, we have the opportunity to further test, but also validate what we have done. Of course, after that, we will offer trainings, and we're making certification of new courses, including new content, and also the enriched courses. We have aimed to have 6 enrich and 6 new courses, 1 new and 1 enrich per core country. Of course, we are creating a certification framework to represent an umbrella certifications for recognizing and validating course content on transitional skills. And of course, we have the ambition to go beyond the project and beyond the sector. So we're using the construction sector as test bed, But we are aiming at having second stage where the BuildSkills Academy will become a certification body that could provide trainings and could certify the missing transitional skills experts. And of course, it will support the bridging the gaps between different member states based on their certification schemes for curricula, training materials, and individuals. The other influential network is just the other side. I speak in BuildSkills that we're working for business, but also vet centers. Here, the EDIH network united chambers, industries, universities for supporting the SMEs. So if in the centers of COVAS, we are mainly focuses on the needs of the people and the employees, here we are working with the SMEs and the support of the business deployment of new skills and technologies in the sector. The network right now consists of almost 250 EDIHs in Europe, dedicated and working in different sectors, but also different geographies. I'm proud to be head of the European Digital Innovation Hub, again in construction sector, and I'm intensively working with the other 8 EDIHs located in different regions of Europe that work in the construction. The EDIH network provides 4 types of services: SME support, ecosystem building, technological innovation through TEDs before invest services, and of course, access to finance, which is the keyword. So here, what we are aiming at, giving the support to the small and medium-sized enterprises to boost their innovation potential. One additional initiative that is also very influential and important is the construction blueprint. Right now, changing the system means that we need to gather all the relevant stakeholders into it. So this is the construction blueprint, another initiative of the European Commission that is uniting all the influential organizations to create new ecosystem of skills. European Commission has launched last year, at the end of the year, their ambitions to create a union of skills. It will be based on those key insights gathered from the blueprint initiatives that create skill strategies with roadmaps and action plans, web access to reskilling sources and knowledge hubs, modular trainings, that hopefully will then become a certified micro-credential courses. And of course, a proposal for micro-credential certification approach, because this is the key. Whatever we do, we need to have this cross-cutting, verified through the different country strategy. And something that I believe might be of great interest of all of you, it is the Pact for Skills in construction. This is an influential pact uniting different vet centers, educators, business representatives with the ambition to unite, discuss, and reshape the future of skills in construction sector. It is guided by the strong partnership, monitoring of the supply and demand, workforce shortages, and the real gaps in skills, how to attract young people and women in the construction sector, because each and every year it is getting more and more attractive with the application of digital technologies, and of course to promote lifelong learning. You know that the European Commission has launched its ambition that annually at least 60% of the adult workers should be reskilled and upskilled annually, which means that since we're all here, more than half of us should go through a certification training. So aiming to achieve this, the European Commission supported and the key organizations has united their forces in the Pact for Skills. And this, the one I'm presenting is in construction, but they're also divided into different fields. Because I believe, and this will be my last contribution, I believe that it is a time where we all realize the importance and necessity of public-private partnership. We need to have demand-led knowledge. We need to have industry-led education and real vocational education and training. With the deployment of artificial intelligence, the jobs are changing as fast as they have never been. Speaking about the sustainable development goals, it is the skills and knowledge that can contribute to the achievement of all of them. Because poverty we want once we have skilled and trained capacity. And it's not only, of course, SDG 4 and 8, 9, all of them. Because we need to have the talent and we need to invest of those people that could work in the new economy we're facing. And we should be prepared. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. That was a really interesting and insightful overview, really, of the landscape of upskilling in the construction centre and also the networks that are engaged in that, and particularly linked to certification, which is of course crucial for future skills recognition. So thank you very much for that. We're going to move on to our next speaker, and our next speaker is Dina Podlinka from Circular Berlin. Dina is the founder, chairwoman, and managing director of Circular Berlin, which is a non-profit driving the transition to a circular economy by local collaboration, knowledge sharing, and innovation. She's a background in corporate strategy and sustainability, and has worked really at the intersection of economic transformation and climate since 2017. She founded Circular Berlin in 2018. So Dina, over to you for your 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your introduction, Anna, and also greetings from my side. I'm also very happy to be here in this round. I think it's very interesting exchange which we are doing today. And to start my presentation, I think even though I will continue the discussion on the BuildSkills Academy, I also want to make sure that I'm talking here from a bit different perspective, not only from the European global perspective, but also from the local entity. We are grounded in Berlin as a non-profit organization and work directly on our city level, trying to transform economy in diverse directions, not only in the built environment, but also for the textile, food, and electronics, where circular economy is also needed as a main transformation driver. And within the education, why I'm also allowed to talk here, because we do run our own educational services, and we also gathered diverse experiences across what circular economy means for education. So that's why I hope I will share also our experiences in terms how the design and what is needed for the future educational development. On the first ground topic, circular economy, and we also been a Circular Berlin, part of BuildSkills Academy, had the mission to identify skill gaps. And for the circular economy as a topic itself is not an easy task, so to say what is actually our future skill gaps, because the topic itself is evolving, the topic itself is in transition, and it's something which we are learning by doing, also creating circular economy right now. What we know, however, in terms of misconceptions, when we talk about circular economy and education and future skills, it's definitely future-oriented and evolving environment. So it means we do need explore educational processes differently here. It's not only about having the courses on the topic, but it's also co-creating new learning experiences, co-creating new skills. However, we also need to make sure that it's something which goes beyond waste management. Quite often we end up, when we talk about circular economy, how to deal with the waste, how to deal with end of life. But what Patrick also mentioned in the beginning is something which we also need to consider on a bigger and systemic level. And multidisciplinary approaches, we've heard that already from Elena and from Maria. I think it's something which I definitely can also underline when we talk about circular economy and education. We do need to talk also about new transferable skills here. It's about system thinking, it's about life cycle analysis, collaborations, and critical thinking. So it's not only technical elements which we needed now for the future, but also new setup of skills of a new workforce, so to say. And this is something which I think we had as a challenge also within the BuildSkills Academy to understand this new concept and to transfer it in terms of education experiences and new skills. And it's not only a task for us, but for example, circular economy was already recognized in 2023 as in the policy brief from CDFOP, that this is something where we should focus when we want to change a sector like a construction. So construction itself, sector is now in transition. and circular economy is the inevitable skills which we need to enable this transition for construction. Also, if we look in details on that, it's, of course, we can talk construction is very big, circular economy is very big, two very systemic topics, but which professions actually we should address in the first place, because we cannot address all of them in a time. And there was also a very interesting study in terms of predictions of the future jobs in construction. And obviously for now, so only from the workforce on the construction sector, we need to observe or look into consideration such jobs as medium and low skills positions. First of all, they are in demand, and demand will rise for this type of workforce in construction, but also engineering activities. They are very much growing for the future transformation, and such roles as business administration, construction management. This is something which right now upfront will grow in demand for the next 10 years. So that's something which we can also address as our focus for where we can start when we want to transform circular economy and construction. And from us, we'll now dive in a little bit in the journey, how to identify the skills within this complex triangle. In my triangle, it is construction, circularity, and education, because there's three areas which overlap here. We started actually first to understand the trends for the construction transformation. As I already mentioned, circular economy is a future ambition, and we need also to understand how we can design, so to say, this future objective. And the European Union already started with quite many diverse targets for future construction transformation. So we had to look on different policies on the construction area, such as renovation wave, which is significant push what we're gonna need for the next 10 years in terms of renovation in the market, but also circular economy action plan or EU Green Deal, which positions actually circularity at the center of transformation. But just last year, there is a new targets appeared for construction sector within the revised Energy Performance in Buildings Directive and Construction Product Declaration. So it's something which regulatory will demand new steps from the construction stakeholders. So it means right now they're not only, it's a wishful thinking for their green and digital transformation, but it's also regulatory pressure to be able equipped for the upcoming regulation. So this was the first step for us to understand how we can look at this future skills definition. On the second step, there is already on EU level significant work done how to address the topic of skills, knowledge, and occupations. And one of the database which we use for our analysis is the ESCO database, which collects more than 3,000 occupations across diverse markets. But obviously for us, the key target was to look on construction occupations. So we revised this database also together with the team of ESCO to see which occupations we can identify there and how we can map them with the skills. So for our current project, BuildSkills Academy, we focus on approximately 35 occupations relevant for construction sector, and then one by one try to map current, existing, and future skills. And as an outcome of this work, indeed, it's not only about circular economy area, but it's also many other dimensions which relevant to be implemented into the educational approaches. So circular economy practices was only one topical area which we focus, but obviously zero emissions, climate resilience, sustainable materials, and occupant health and well-being. This is key topical areas which we think it's important to address in the next 10 years for the transformation of the sector. So this is on the level of topics, how we can dive in at the level of skills, because it's something which is if we talk about certification, it's something which is crucial to address. And just to give you a glimpse of different skill set across circular economy, so we did structure it across such fields as renovation, general understanding of circularity, different digital tools which right now evolve to optimize the processes for example, for material tracking and reuse. Clearly, the topic of design for deconstruction is playing a crucial role when we talk about circular economy future in construction, but all around material flow management. This is something which is very essential to integrate into the educational concept. Maria already mentioned one of the platforms which came out as a significant output from this research, also done together, like now digitally programmed, so to say, as a tool by the team of Authorn University of Economics and Business. So I do really encourage you to test it out, because for VET providers, it could be very significant support how you can identify these future skills and how you can update your courses. So we're also very welcome for your feedbacks in terms of how it now structured. But generally, this is already something which we internally received the feedback that it's a very unique tool in terms of operationalization, because for now there is no possibility to map, so to say, the skills and understand how it can update the courses. And last words from my side in terms of educational design, I think I will kind of underline already some words from my previous speakers, but I do think, as we are talking about innovations in education as well, so it's not only about innovation construction or innovation somewhere else, but it's about also innovative topics within the education. We should dare to experiment with the new formats. It's very important, because that's how we also can design these future skills. I think it's also very important to consider the circular economy is an evolving topic and very much targeted on the European level, on the national level. VET providers should see it as well as some competitive advantage if they include it in their portfolio of the courses. But also strengthen the partnerships. I guess it's a similar idea which previous speakers mentioned, but for me it's also important to highlight it's not only industry-led partnerships, but it's also important to identify the front runners which right now design circular economy, that making this future already today, and to work with them, because they will be the one who define this future needs for the skills in circular economy. So, and on that level, I will conclude my presentation and open for next questions.
Thank you very much, Dina. Again, that was really, really insightful, and that focus on the construction centre, on the conclusion that we need different models and we need creativity, innovation, engagement, and so on is really, I think, going to be very important for the future in that area. So thank you very much for those fantastic insights. We're going to move on quickly to our last speaker before we are able to take Q&A, but I should just say to the audience that if you have questions in advance of the closing panel Q&A, please put them in the chat and we can perhaps address some of them at the Q&A session after our last speaker. Okay. So our last speaker is Antti Charlambois, and she has extensive experience as a vocational educational training trainer. She's a strong track record in designing and delivering training programs and developing training materials. She's conducted numerous training sessions and workshops nationally and internationally, particularly in the fields of circular economy. And she's also currently the director of auspices, a consultancy that specializes in energy and environmental issues. So, Antti, I'll hand the floor over to you for the next 10 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. Sometimes it's not so good to be the last speaker, because most of the things that you would like to say, more or less, have been said by the previous speakers. But anyway, I will share my presentation. Just give me 1 second. Okay, just let me know if everything is fine. So my presentation focuses on the challenges faced by the VET providers in integrated circular skills into training programs. As you said before, due to my experience as trainer, but also as a person that developed a lot of curriculum tools on circular economy, I think that I put my experiences in this presentation So first of all, I think we need to define what are the circular skills. Because circular skills are not only sustainability, it's a combination of skills that support sustainability, the resource efficiency, and waste reduction. Circular skills enable systems thinking and closed-loop processes. Those skills should include repair, reuse, manufacturing, eco-design, life cycle thinking, and are relevant in multi-sectors. And also should combine technical expertise and adaptability and innovation. Circular skills promote a mindset shift from linear to regenerative economic models and encourage, as you said before, the cross-sector thinking, but also the public-private partnerships. And it is quite essential if we would like to shift to a greener economy. The importance of VET in the circular economy is very essential because are those that they can provide the education tailored in the needs of the emerging green jobs. The VET providers should equip the learners with hands-on skills, not only the theoretical skills, which you can take it if you come in a classroom, but also we need to equip the trainees with skills like in recycling, repair, renewable energy, sustainable manufacturing, and waste management, of course. In real-world applications, the VET providers support to bridge the gap in the sustainability sector, ensuring that the workforce is capable to support the resource efficiency, low carbon solutions, and closed loops solutions. VET is a vital driver in building a skilled labor force that can meet the demand of the green transition and foster the long-term inclusive growth in circular economy. But now let's focus on the challenges. The challenges that a VET provider can face. The first is related with the curriculum misalignment. Many existing curricula are outdated and do not reflect the current circular economy practices. I have seen many released advertised curricula that deal with topics that are not so modern and do not address the real circular economy principles. The circular skills are often scattered across unrelated subjects, like in business schools, like economic, like engineering. So the curriculum should bring together all these interdisciplinary participants and to provide them the necessary tools to integrate sustainability, the systems thinking, and life cycle analysis. And also should be designed to consider the different background and experiences of the participants. And also should be carefully designed to address sector-specific requirements. That's why the BuildSkills Academy is important, because it's a sector-specific project that deals with the construction sector. So the trainer capability is another challenge that I faced through my personal experience. Many instructors are good in academic background, but they lack knowledge in industrial applications or practical experience. So we have to be very careful in selecting the trainers. And also it's important to upskilling the trainers to be able to address the industry needs. The targeted training in circular economy tools is essential to enable educators to provide high quality, future-oriented instruction tailored to the needs of multidisciplinary learners and sectors. Challenge number 3 is the limited industry integration. So we can see that VET providers, they develop some training programs, they find appropriate participants, but still we miss the interlink between the industry needs, the real world needs with the training that is provided by a VET. So I think that it's important to apply all these collaboration principles before delivering any circular economic course in lifelong learning. Collaboration with innovation centers, industry, other circular economy businesses, innovators are important to co-deliver courses and share also their infrastructure, because to have a very good training in circular economy, we need also the provider to have the necessary infrastructure and can be a shared resource. Challenge number 4 are the systemic barriers. These are related with the policy level. Due to my experience, I face also the inefficient policy support and funding for curriculum reform or educator training or the industrial collaboration. So I think it's important to change this. It's a systemic change within the VET landscape. The key recommendations is to develop interdisciplinary and circular aligned curricula. We design curricula to be interdisciplinary, connecting environmental science, design, engineering, and business. Integrate core circular economy concepts such as the resource efficiency, life cycle thinking, product reuse, sustainability, innovation, and to embed real-world case studies and problem solving to strengthen the understanding and application. We need upskilling VET staff and create digital learning formats to foster the industry partnerships and policy alignment, invest in VET infrastructure, supporting the practical and circular skills, and upgrade training center with green technology equipment, repair labs, and material reuse facilities. And the conclusions of my presentation is that VET is essential to advancing a sustainable and circular economy. Nobody can doubt that. Circular mindsets and skills must be directly addressed in the classroom, which requires investment in resources such as training equipment, teacher upskilling, access to educational materials, resource libraries. The challenges are the multi-layer and significant effort to fully mainstream circular economy principle within the VET systems. Should be integrated, the circular economy should be integrated as mandatory cross-cutting theme within the vocational education and training qualification frameworks, including the in-house training, in-company training. And multiple, these are my 10 minutes, so I am finished. Multiple barriers currently hinder the full integration of circular skilling, including gaps in curriculum design, trainer capability, and industry alignment. Collaboration, innovation, and sustained investment are key drivers for embedding circular economy practices effectively into vocational education and training. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antti. That was, again, really insightful and very much provides recommendations from that hands-on experience and real-world experience of providing the skills in education. That's really crucial because we need that know-how to be able to integrate that into the development of future curricula, future programs, for upskilling of the labour markets that we need for the future. So thank you very much for those insights. I'd like to thank all our speakers before we go to the Q&A. They were really wonderful wonderful talks from esteemed speakers, and it's wonderful to have them here today. And now we are going to move over from the presentation session to the session on Q&A. So we haven't that many questions from the chat, and if they emerge, we will incorporate them. But I do have a question separately anyway, as moderator for each of you on the basis of what you have presented. So the very first person I'm going to go in order is Elena, but I think, Paul, I'm under the impression that you're taking Elena's questions. So the first question I had in relation to what Elena presented was, what's the impact, do you think, of the capabilities for the future hub going to have in terms of its impacts on the global value chain? What's the ambition in that regard?
Do you want me to answer that? Is Elena gone? Okay.
Elena, it's over to you. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so the basic idea is the likes of, let's say, in Ireland, IDA and Enterprise. So IDA, the Industrial Development Authority, look after the multinationals in Ireland, and then the SMEs are looked after by Enterprise Ireland. But SMEs in Ireland import and export quite a bit, actually. I mean, they're not just because we're a small open economy, but like they are very good and very aggressive in terms of attracting FDI and doing business on global supply chains. But they're coming down the track. There is the ESG regulation, reporting frameworks from Europe, and of course we're seeing, with ports, we're seeing climate change increasing sea levels and destroying ports, and we're seeing, so it's attacking supply chains. Basically, geopolitics is attacking supply chains. The new tariffs are attacking supply chains. So I think rather than unilateral approaches to competing with other countries on global supply chains, that it could be a good idea to work through UNITA's unilateral coordination committee on its what's called multilateral industrial policy committee. And the idea there is a bit of coordinated efforts to help each other internalize the damage they do on society or governments or nature or the environment along the supply chain, right? And in doing that, not only do they hit the target of UNITO, which is inclusive and sustainable industrial development along supply chains, I think they will also just make the supply chain more resilient, not just in terms of the transformation it's taking, but also to the other things that are happening in terms of economic shocks. It's not just environmental shocks or societal shocks. But the first step then is to upskill and reskill the people in the departments of enterprises and in agencies like, for industrial agencies involved in industrial policy, not just to think unilaterally, but to work with other countries in a multilateral sense along supply chains. Let's say the built environment would be a good example, to internalize these damages on each other. So this is like the spillover analysis of SDSN, basically, to internalize them. But we fully realize that even people in government like micro-credentials and certification. And then when that sort of knowledge is there, at the end of the day, it's the private sector, should be implementing the will of the government. So therefore, it's useful for multinationals and for the SMEs to have that type of knowledge there, and that type of, global hubs, which will have regional hubs that will actually be trained in these things. And then the last point, which is important and got out of my head, Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that. But hopefully that gives you a good sense of this. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'm going to have just a quick follow-up, I suppose, is that, sorting out, global value change in that regard does require multilateralism, I think, as you mentioned. But politics gets in the way. Of course, it's a bigger question, but we are moving towards a world that's less multilateral and more unilateral. And, how do those barriers impact upon projects like capability for the future?
I find actually that was the thing that slipped my mind. Very good, Enda. So the reality is that, for example, coming into this Finance for Sustainable Development meeting, the fourth international conference in Seville in a few weeks, the Americans and allies are not signing the outcome document, right? So that means that any chance of a consensus document is not going to happen. So the response is now to set up an action platform where coalitions, like in a partial sense, of governments, but now with stakeholders like academia and private sector NGOs and so on, that they would team up to implement a particular action around a specific kind of issue. You know what I mean? It could be sovereign debt, or it could be sovereign bonds or something, green bonds or something like that, right? So what's actually happening is that the likes of ASEAN, you suddenly have Japan, Korea, China talking to each other, saying we have to have a stronger regional approach. So it's partial multilateralism, but it's more regional or along supply, more regional where you're gone vertical, incorporating your stakeholders, right? So it's kind of this reaction, well, if some of the big countries are pulling out and we can't have consensus in this horizontal sense, well, then vertically, though, we can have consensus and partnerships and SDG partnerships in a kind of partial multilateralism, but of stakeholders and not just member states. And this is how the Association of Caribbean States is pushing this. I presume hopefully Europe will get its act together and push this. So in other words, there will be pushback against rejecting multilateralism and sustainable development and climate action, where the other countries, together with their stakeholders, will get involved. And believe me, the transportation companies, the insurance companies, the legal services, the financial markets who've issued trillions of green bonds and equity funds, like none of them are pulling out of these, let's call them partial multilateral stakeholder approaches, right? So I think we're going to see, a diversion into vertical structures away from consensus in a horizontal sense across governments.
Okay, thanks, Paul. That's actually really insightful and useful. Maria, I'm going to move on to ask you a question, if that's okay. So, I was really taken, I suppose, with your presentation around the role of BuildSkills. It's really developed into a very important organization. And I noted the fact that, I was wondering what you saw as the role of BuildSkills in particular in the future. You did mention, for example, that it could become a certification body. And I thought that was interesting. And I was wondering if you could elaborate maybe on the gap that's there a bit more in relation to certification in the sector, and how might the BuildSkills Academy fill that gap, but also fill it in a way that it liaises with the international certification bodies and so on. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, well, we mentioned since the very beginning of this event the key word, and it is micro-credentials. BuildSkills is a great test bed on how fast educational tracks can be implemented in the sector, and testing into different societies, because we have different ecosystems throughout Europe. We can test and verify the methodology that will support the acceptance and mutual recognition of micro-credentials. So this is the first point. The second one is, yes, we are aiming at certifying transitional experts. So those experts that could be able to really support the entities in their transition from classical to more green and sustainable development, to incorporate all those transitional skills, green and digital, that are cross-cutting issues and the cross-cutting points in what it's really needed. Because with the AI continent and the highest ambitions of Europe, we need definitely to find a working tool on how to certify people and how to give them the tools to be more green and digital. So this is the role as we see it, but also we believe that stepping on the results of BuildSkills, we could be able to enlarge this and to boost the potential for other sectors as well.
Okay, thank you, Maria. That's really interesting, and thanks for that. Tina, I'm going to move on to ask you a quick question, if that's okay. Again, I was very interested in the presentation, and I suppose one of the things that struck me when I was thinking about your presentation was that you mentioned the need, obviously, for circular economy skills in future curricula in the labor markets, etc., and so forth. And you mentioned that Circular Berlin, as part of the project with BuildSkills, was able to identify, for example, circular economy skills that were needed or where the gaps were. And that's really, really interesting. But my question relates to thinking into the future. Are you able to identify the skills that we don't have? Or is there any way of thinking about how we might become more resilient, even as a workforce or as a labor force or as a pool of skilled labor in the circular economy, where we might be able to think about future scenarios and so on, and develop skills that we might need in the future but don't have?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's very good because it's exactly the discussion we had in the project, indeed, for this sector, because indeed, and it's also very interesting when we talk to ESCO itself, because ESCO is something which identified the current skills. In the conversation with them, they said, indeed, circular economy is a new area. It's now, the database, for example, is not yet fulfilled with the future skills. And this is something in the transition where even this accumulated knowledge bases, such as the ESCO, they are right now in the process of identification or anticipating these future skills, which are not yet named, I would say, on the market. And this is also was our challenge within the BuildSkills. So one of the approach was indeed talking to these front runners. So the businesses that are already working in the topic of circular economy and construction. So we did organized surveys and also interviews with the sector leaders in that, so that they could formulate, first of all, their needs in the future, so to say, working force, what they envision in terms of how they can find support from the current market to transition to circular economy businesses in construction. And interestingly enough, so we also hosted one internal workshops in Germany with diverse groups from the construction experts who already evolving into the circular economy as well. And interestingly enough, besides, as I mentioned also in the presentation, besides this technical skills, which partially identified but not yet saturated, so it's also we need to think there is some skills in circular economy that they are identified but they are not yet saturated. That's also something which we should consider. We don't call them future skills, we call them current skills, but it's something where the market must transition as well, because they are not yet spread out in curriculum, also that as we've heard from the presentation of Antis. But the future one that even not yet formulated as a skills in this discussion was quite often, it's a transdisciplinary work. So sometimes it's not only about looking at the construction sector, but it's also about learning how construction sector or construction professionals can actually work together and collaboratively. So quite often there was, for example, such words even mentioned as a communication skills. Actually, the companies that working in the circular economy in construction right now struggling to scale their impact and to communicate what they want and communicate how they do it, just because the construction professionals don't have this particular need. So it's also some, so to say, hand to look into what the construction sector needs. But if I'm coming to this future definitions, I do think it's very important to formulate with the organizations and companies that already working on operating under circular economy umbrella in construction sector, because they are the one who can define quite precisely, okay, this is work which we are doing right now, for example, inventorization of the building before it has to be deconstructed. There is no such construction professional right now on the market. There is no such occupation defined on the market for doing this, basically architects who are doing that. But this is something which was basically coming out from this conversation. So this is actually the new profession which will be there if we want to implement circular economy. And from that level, you need to define which skills this person needs and how it has to be translated into the curriculum. So that's, I think, the way forward and the fastest way forward to do it. But that's why it's very important that it happens simultaneously in diverse geographies, not only in one particular places, because I think it's also something which we can learn from each other and then scale it up faster.
Yeah, thanks. And that's really interesting. I mean, this idea that we have trans-occupational skills essentially, is really interesting, because even in academia, we've talked about that concept in relation to interdisciplinarity for 20 years, but we're still not very good at it. It's quite tricky and it's complex. So really interesting that you're talking about that in relation to the labor force as well. So that's very interesting. So thank you, Dina, for that. Antti, I have a question for you. And again, I was struck by your presentation. Again, you're at the coalface of the delivery of a lot of the training and have so much experience in that regard. And that was very insightful. I noted one of the things that struck me was you mentioned that there was limited industry recognition for VET skills. And I was wondering two questions. One, why do you think that's the case? What's the one key obstacle to that recognition? And then number two, in terms of the training and your experience for the circular economy, is the focus on delivering skills training or on competency-based training? So what's your take on those two questions, please? Thanks.
Thank you very much for the questions. Yeah, I think I mentioned the key challenges that we face as vet providers or as trainers. And I think that is both, if I take the second part of your question. I mean, the first one is to improve the skills, because the circular economy skills are so specific in several sectors. So from my experience, I realized that it's much better if we develop a program, a training program, a lifelong learning program for a specific sector, like hospitality, like construction, because then you have to share experiences also among the participants. And it's very important the dialogue that's taking place among the participants that face the same challenges in their everyday working life. So for me, it's not necessary any longer to develop just general circular economy courses, but should be sector-specific courses with the integration of industry and to have a very strong partnerships also with innovation hubs or infrastructure providers. Regarding your first question, I think that is the first part of your question. So first of all, it's important to develop skills and then competences. This is my point of view. And also, we need to integrate the circular skills in the training programs by building stronger industry collaboration and the qualification framework support. Moreover, we encourage to develop curricula with hands-on projects. Circular economy is not only learning-based I mean, you go to a classroom and you learn about circular economy, that's all. You have to have hands-on training, if this answers your question.
That's perfect. Thank you. That's a really good answer. Thank you very much for that, Auntie. So we have one final question. Thank you for all the panelists. And this is actually one that's come from the audience, and it's a general one. So whoever wants to answer it, please jump in and feel free. It's from Domi Kikuchi, who is on the train on the way home in Tokyo. And he said he'd like to ask a question. It says, we know the energy sector CO2 emissions stand for about 70% in all the industry, but the skilled resources to work for the energy sector is limited. How can we support the vocational training for this sector, for the energy sector? So would anyone like to take that question? Auntie.
Yeah, I agree with the question of the colleague. It's important to, I mean, because I have experience working with the power sector and renewable energies. So to see a real shift is not only to train the, the lower management workforce working in the energy industry, but also, first of all, to prepare a course that should be addressed to the upper management. Because sometimes maybe you have very skilled personnel coming from the lower management to let's say, to workers, but the upper management cannot understand how important it is, the shift to more environmental friendly fuels, how we can reduce the CO2 equivalent, the greenhouse gas emissions, etc.
Okay, thank you very much, Auntie. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists very much for contributing today. It was really very, very insightful, and we thank you on behalf of all of the organisers for making your contribution today. And in my role as moderator, I was asked to develop a few key takeaways, I suppose, to sum up what we've talked about and discussed today. I suppose one of the things that I would like to sort of point out is that the focus today was really on the built environment, and I think that's very important because we know from UN forecasts that about 70% of the world's population will be urbanized in 2050. So we're going to have more people and more productivity essentially emerging from the built environment. That means that the built environment really is a microcosm, I think, for the wider economy and for the wider labour force in relation to the restructuring that's required. So what we're talking about here today is not just instructive for the built environment, it's actually instructive for the wider economy and for the wider global economy, I think, more generally. The second takeaway for me is that it's quite obvious from the various talks that alternative models of upskilling are required, not just formal models, but informal models too. And the in-between models are required for the future labour market restructuring. So in other words, we need to work together on a sectoral basis as education providers to be able to ensure that upskilling is coherent and useful to the people who put in the time to actually undertake the training. The third thing is that certification and standards, I think, are really crucial to ensuring that upskilling is transferable across jurisdictions. I mean, we can't be telling, a huge part of the labour force to upskill in one jurisdiction only for them maybe to move and it not be recognised somewhere else. And I mean, that does require multilateralism, as Paul said as well, in relation to cooperation across boundaries, in relation to educational recognition and certification. So I think that is a key takeaway for me. And of course, the final one is that it's becoming clear that lifelong learning is becoming essential for the labor, more essential for the labour market, I think, in contemporary society. As a result, I think, of ruptures that are happening really on a technological level. We have very significant ruptures now, for example, in contemporary society, but also on a societal level. As a societal need, we need to change as a society if we're to actually face any future at all as a human race. And so I think that lifelong learning component, that educational component is really going to be crucial for the future. So that's what I learned today. And I'd like to thank you all for that, and hopefully those takeaways were useful. And finally, I'd like to finish up the session. We're slightly over time, but I'd like to finish up the session by thanking all of the speakers, number one, but also thanks to Isabella and Cian from SDSN, and of course Paul, who's influential in organising this as well. It's really wonderful to have SDSN and the SDG Academy leading events like this as part of EU Green Week. So thank you all for attending. And bye-bye.
Thanks, Enda.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone,
so
for
much.
coming.